Welcome to the Disciple of Christ podcast. I hope you're enjoying the sunrise as I am in the frozen tundra of Parowan, Utah. This is part number 3 of my interview with Eric Samuels. Once again, I want to let you know, be a little bit discerning because it does cover some adult themes as we answer questions that you guys have sent regarding Eric's experiences, as well as his detailing of a 4-hour exorcism as he deals with some of the very fierce darkness that continue to follow him around. But again, it's good to have you on part number 3 of my interview with Eric Samuels. Eric Samuels back on the Disciple of Christ podcast for a third time, and I cannot help but notice you are no longer in your tent along the Appalachian Trail, but
No.
you seem to have hit a brick wall in your life. Is that true?
It's very true. That was nice. That was a nice pun.
But it's great to have you back. There's been a whole bunch since part 1 and 2, all kinds of questions that have come my way. And I know that there's a lot more a part of your faith journey. So I want to follow up on that. I think this first part of the interview, I'll be asking a lot of the questions that I received because I probably got more messages regarding your interview than any other that I've done. I'll probably ask those questions first, but there's definitely more with a certain level of spiritual drama that happens in your faith journey.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
So just to if anybody is tuning into part number 3 and they didn't do parts number 1 and 2 yet, I would say shame on you. Go back and listen to parts 1 and parts number 2. Quick recap. You were starting at about age 15. You were raised in a Christian home. You read the Bible cover to cover for yourself. You got recruited into Luciferianism.
I did.
And not only that, you were 13 years incredibly active as a recruiter, making you rich as a young man in the process.
Oh, yes. Very.
Yeah.
Very.
And as you were getting ready to go to the next level, as they call it, it was going to require a human sacrifice.
Yes.
Not only that, you saw your target, and it was about a 4-year-old girl.
Yeah.
You escaped. You got baptized. And everything has been peachy keen, hunky dory, and no issues since then. So that's the quick recap of part number 1. Part number 2, you were on your spiritual journey. You got baptized, member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Certain things didn't make sense to you, like regarding Joseph Smith's polygamy, as well as Mormon chapter 8, to where Moroni's calling from the dust saying, Jesus has shown you to me. Your churches have all become corrupted.
Yeah.
Hey. In other words, here's one of the first questions. When people are viewing the level of Luciferianism, where you were going to the temple, it seemed like weekly you're seeing these high priests who have grips and handshakes. It seems like they have powers that can jolt you, electrify you, get you back in their Luciferian reality.
Yeah.
For you to escape that, have you ever felt like your life is in danger? People just ask, how is he alive? Have you felt like your life is in danger?
Not now, but I did for, years.
How would that manifest?
I'm sorry?
How would that manifest?
You just, I don't know, paranoid. Because like as you're going through it, that nobody really escapes. I know from my knowledge, I've always heard that that once you're in, it's like a gang. Once you're in, you can't get out. Only one way out is death. And so leaving there, I put my trust in God. I prayed and prayed and prayed. Was like, Father, just protect me. If I do die, if they come for me, if they kill me, if some accident happens because of this, it must be your will. But if it be your will, just protect me. Put a barrier over me. Send an angel to guard me. Anything. I was like, because I told him, I said, you've always given me this impression, especially since I'd left the Luciferian temple. But you had always given me this impression that I was meant for something greater. Of course, nothing to rule the world, but meant to do some type of work in the end of days or end of times or whatever you would call it. But I always felt like I had a purpose for that. I felt like my life would lead up to, I have a work to do at that time. I was like, so if that's, I could be deceived because I was deceived before, but I feel like I recognize evil and its deception even when it comes in the form of good. So for years, I'd spent probably I'd say about probably like 4 or 5 years after that, I'd spent praying and just wondered, like I guess any day now. So I was trying to enjoy any part of life I could, trying to enjoy the little things, the big things, and any blessings that would come my way. Um, After a while, just you don't forget, but you just stop thinking about it. You build up this spiritual courage that if it happens to me, it happens to me. But I feel like, and that's the funny part. I was actually talking to my wife um, about that shortly after part two. About I feel like a lot of people come and ask, you know, how are you? You know, how are you still alive? I even had friends who were like, "Man, I can't believe you're still alive." And I'm thinking to myself, "You go to a Christian church? Oh yeah, yeah, yeah." So you go to a Christian church, you hear all these things, and no matter what church you go to, any church you walk into, you should always hear that God is the protector. He can save you from anything. So why not be able to save me from this? Um, that's the only thing I could ever come up with. He preserved me for a time like this, for a work to do at the end of times, or in the last days, or before the coming of Christ. And that I put my trust and faith into Him so much, other than just saying, "Oh, God will
No.
protect me." I fully believe that He would protect me. And it's like Christ said, it's not kind of like another thing I told her. It's like you say you believe in Christ, but you deny His power thereof. That's in the Bible.
Ah,
And
yeah.
I feel like that's going to be a big problem before the coming of Christ. Is they profess with their lips that they believe in the Christ, but they deny His power thereof. So it took me a few years, but I fully started believing. I don't care who you people are. I don't care what in this world you own or what in this world you run. My God is greater than you. And I do fully believe that He will protect me. I believe in His power, and that's why I'm still alive. I know without a doubt in my mind, and I'll argue that with anyone all day long.
There's something that I'm recognizing. Um, when Lehi's family gets to the land of Bountiful, and it seems like this is a great place to set up shop. Maybe we should just stay here. And Nephi gets the commandment to build the tools and then build the boat. His older brothers are mocking the sermon that he gives them in First Nephi chapter 17. He reminds them of the miracles that they already know from the scriptures, including the Exodus in the days of Moses. And he says, if God can do that, why can't He tell me build a boat and get across these great waters? And I noticed the same sort of fearlessness that young David had in the face of Goliath. Um, Here's what I do want to ask. At what point did the Luciferianism seem like a deception? Because while you're in it, it seemed like greater light and knowledge. As you were getting into your 20s, and it was in your late 20s that you ended up escaping from there, were there signs beforehand that were giving you pause? Did you find yourself fully dedicated, fully enveloped, or was there already, I don't know, cracks in the dam, so to speak?
Uh, I knew years earlier, probably in my late teens, early 20s. It's like this. It's when you start thinking about the stuff you're going to end up having to do, the stuff you've heard about other people doing, but you kind of just don't care. You start to develop this attitude of greed and pride, and I feel like it was the I feel like it was this sacrifice, this human sacrifice, or being involved in some type of satanic ritual abuse or anything like that that really started hitting me hard. Like you start looking at like people in general, it's like, could I really kind of like I said in part one, you start thinking about, oh, I'll do it in a heartbeat. If it gives me gain, I'll do it in a heartbeat. Until that time comes, and some people really do go through with it. Happens all the time, but for me, it was one of those. It's like I can't do it. Like
Your conscience was bothering you?
yeah. It's like you see. It's like, wait, this is you've given me a target, a mark, or whatever you would want to call it, but this is a child. This is a human being, and when you start seeing something that God created, when you start seeing something so beautiful, that he created. Um, I think that's when the beauty of God really starts to show is in people, especially little innocent children, innocent people. But
Now, how did Luciferians teach, or how did you view God's creations, like the planet itself? Because Lucifer is not the creator of Earth,
no,
according to Luciferianism,
no,
and the inhabitants on here, they aren't the offspring of Lucifer. So, how would you view being a part of humanity? Did Lucifer feel like he was continuing to fight against humanity? How would that be taught?
no. I mean, it's technically like before we came, we were considered a brother or sister to him. Um, a third was, I guess, a third of the angels that followed him out, our brothers and sisters that followed him out of heaven, came down and decided, hey, these, you know, God is their creator. He did create all of them, but this is an evil God, so now it's up to us to save them. So for them, for Lucifer and the other angels, it's the way you're taught is that they came down, they fell to the earth and sacrificed everything. Their their home in heaven, they sacrificed that to come down to earth to save their brothers and sisters.
And the saving process, is that the greater light and knowledge that Lucifer offers? Is that how they would teach it?
Yeah, their job is to. They've gone all through humanity from Adam until me and you, and their job is to save as many as possible with this greater light and knowledge of Lucifer's teaching, which is um, that we were meant to become like him, and by becoming like Lucifer is to become like God Himself.
Yeah.
And that uh, in the same way that God sent Jesus Christ, He sent Him here, and I guess through the adoption process, Christ will become our God, and so on and so forth. But
Now,
um,
and you mentioned in part number one, it started with an ordinance. It sounds like there was Luciferian ordinances along the way.
yeah,
And going to the next level was now one of these blood ordinances.
yeah, yeah. That sacrifice was in order for them to make it make sense. In which, to my young mind, it did make sense, and for a lot of people, as they become adults in their 20s and 30s, it still continues to make sense. Because they don't look at it so much as like, oh, I'm fixing to take someone's life. This is a sacrifice. Um, but they look at it as in the sacrifice that Lucifer made by exiting heaven and everything he put on the line. They look at it as the sacrifice of when, kind of like we discussed in, I think it was part one, maybe,
Yeah.
but where Lucifer tempted Christ when he was trying to fast for those 40 days. And then Christ himself understood Lucifer's greater light knowledge, and he became a sacrifice for us also. Um, and that today we still practice those temple ordinances as Luciferian, and you still practice the sacrifice. And so the sacrifice is not, Luciferians look at it like, what's the word? They look at it more of like, if you're going to practice something that was practiced 1,000 years ago or 2,000 years ago, it needs to be the same today. No little stand in or no mockery of it. They like to go through the whole process. So when they say sacrifice, it means a life, a human life. And Lucifer was chosen for us as a sacrifice. Christ was chosen as a sacrifice. Somebody else may be chosen as that sacrifice.
You mentioned that the Luciferians recognize things are of an ancient date. You don't change these ordinances. It's got to be the same. You're making me think of when the secret combinations are being shared with a little bit of specific detail. Let me share this with you in Ether 8 and get your thoughts if this is the same sort of mindset that you were seeing. In Ether chapter 8, it's the Jaredite nation. There's about to be continual seasons of so-and-so is killing so-and-so to take over the kingdom, and then some. Verse 8 of Ether 8. Now the daughter of Jared, being exceedingly expert and seeing the sorrows of her father, thought to devise a plan whereby she could redeem the kingdom unto her father. Now the daughter of Jared was exceedingly fair, and it came to pass that she did talk with her father, and she said unto him, Whereby hath my father so much sorrow? Hath he not read the record which our fathers brought across the great deep? Behold, is there not an account concerning them of old, that by their secret plans did obtain kingdoms and great glory? Was it the same sort of understanding among the Luciferians to where what we're doing has its ancient origins and it still plays out today?
Yeah. Very, very, very much so. Yes.
And she ended up doing the the honeypot trap, where she goes and dances before the person that she wants to get an alliance, singing "Hit Me, Baby, One More Time."
Yeah.
And he says, "I want to marry you." It's like, okay, go ahead and bring me my the head of my grandpa.
Yeah.
Yeah. She's not the one who did that. She was the honey. Would you view did you see any of that play out in your days there, to where people would be seduced by women in order to get power and gain?
Oh yeah, yeah. That's super common.
Yeah, but in other words, that was specifically part of, hey, the organization that we're part of. Let's go ahead and use the allure of women to get them under our control.
Oh yeah, yeah. They use any resource they have. Like there's no links they won't go through, no
Well,
hoops they won't jump through.
what kind of things would you see? In other words, are you seeing this at a distance, hearing rumors, or would you hear rumors and then see those plans play out?
First, as a young person, like a teenager, that you hear about these things. But I guess as you're going through it, you start to actually you start to see these things, because most of your friends that you're more or less associating yourself with are Luciferian. You have that common ground in the same way that a lot of Latter Day Saints are just friends with Latter Day Saints, or Baptist friends with Baptists.
It's the
Luciferians are no
community,
different. Yeah, yeah. It's this person understands me. This person gets me. So you start to surround yourself with them, and to you, they're human beings, and they are. But I mean, you start to surround yourself with them, and you start getting to see different things, and you hear the stories. And for me, it was that's a lot of what it was stories of random things you hear about that go on in the temple, or things that just go on outside of the temple even. But
what kind of stories would you hear? Is there one of them that comes to mind where you realized, I was hearing about this and I saw how those details played out?
um probably some of the biggest that come to mind. I know I had this buddy. He was out of Dayton, Ohio, because that's where I used to travel up uh, to go meet with him, because he wasn't like a mentor, but he'd been in a little longer than me. And I know he said that he had his wife um, seduce this other man. And so I was like, "What do you mean by, like, I know what seducing is, but like, why is your wife seduce another man?" He says, "Well, we're looking for this recruit, and this guy was super knowledgeable and super like into the Bible, and we had this extreme knowledge of Scripture." And so it's like, okay, so what happened? And he said, "Well, he had his wife seduce this man sexually, and it's
It,
almost
it,
like
it was no big deal to him that his wife is now being physical with another person,
no,
because of the pursuit of power and gain.
yeah, yeah, power and gain's the goal. It's husband or wife. If you don't look at marriage the same uh, as what a normal person would." Um,
In part number one, when I was asking about your time at the temple, it seems like when you would go, there'd be about 200 people or so that would be at the Luciferian temple. And you mentioned, when I asked how many of them are active Christian leaders, you said about 60 or 70. You weren't talking about a percentage. You're talking about 60 or 70. About a third are active as Christian leaders.
yeah, yeah.
And as you look back now, what would the signs be if somebody wanted to be on the lookout? Hey, are there Luciferians that are in our midst? You already pointed out that pursuit of power and gain. There's a whole lot of rich religious leaders. What else would be sticking out to you now?
Scripture based sermon, um, in which I just had a conversation with somebody a day or two ago about this. So we were talking about Christian pastors around the country, even around the world, and so this guy, I can't remember when it was. It was within the last few months or so, but this guy, some dude on the internet, has gone around and started talking to people about talking to pastors and Christian preachers about things they teach, and asking them what types of things they actually teach. If it's all scriptural based, and there was a lot of them, it's like, well, we kind of have to appeal to the person. That is what I look for. So many people are they teach tithing. It's everything is scripted, and there's things that they leave out. Like why are Christian pastors afraid to talk about certain things in our modern society now, um, that they would definitely in our society be judged on
Okay.
and hated for?
If I'm hearing the pattern correctly, when people would abandon the word of God as they have it and just teach their own philosophies,
Yeah, just the
it,
philosophies of men.
it's interesting. You and I at some point are going to be doing a deep dive into the LDS Temple endowment because I want to get your thoughts on there.
Yeah.
But I'll give you one thing specifically. The LDS Temple endowment depicts the creation of the world. Adam and Eve, as they are put in the perfect garden and they go through their descent of being kicked out of the garden, Lucifer shows up again at a certain point trying to recruit them. And he says, regarding religious leaders, there will be many willing to teach you the philosophies of men mingled with scripture.
Yeah.
And that was very specific inside of there. That's what I'm hearing as a pattern. They'll teach their own philosophies mixed with the scriptures.
Yeah. That's what Lucifer does. That's literally the path that you follow as a Luciferian. It's not as deep down as you would think it'd be. It's right here in plain sight. It's kind of like God said, nothing, Lucifer create nothing new under the sun. He's going to take, as long as he can get 99.1% of truth, if he can just throw that little sprinkle in there, it changes the entire thing.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what they do. It's the philosophies of men mingle with truth in scripture.
Here's what has stuck out to me, especially these past few years, is the same concept that you just expressed. The wording that I use is he is willing to teach whatever percentage of truth is necessary as long as the end result is a greater deception.
Yeah.
In other words, he's looking to make the interception in the end zone. He's not playing at the other end of the field.
Yeah. It kind of reminds me of Christ talking in the Bible, and I think I mentioned it before, but it says, even if it's so, he would deceive even the very elect. And so I always thought to myself, if you're a firm believer in God and in his son, Jesus Christ, it's like, how would you be deceived? But I think it's where I've talked to so many people who don't know their own scripture because they put their full trust into man, whether that man be a preacher or he'd call himself a prophet. They're following a preacher. They're following the prophet. They're following these things instead of following Christ.
Now, your time at the Luciferian temple, how often would you be able to observe those who have already taken it to the next level, observe them in the performance of ordinances?
A couple times, actually.
What would describe the room as you would see it?
Room was beautiful. It's really, really bright in there. It's I don't know. You see a lot of like a white, a lot of gold, a lot of lavender. I know. I remember the first time I ever saw it. That's the first one I remember the most of. Because I was walking by this room, I happened to glance right, kind of diagonal from where I was, and there was this room, and it was almost like an octagon shape. And yeah, so this room was kind of octagon shaped, and I remember seeing like these beautiful plants in there. There was a beautiful mural on the wall. There was this guy on this chair in the middle that almost looked like a throne. It wasn't quite as big, but it was enough where people could stand around him and put their hands on him. But there was these beautiful designs on the floor, and it's almost like the outer rim was more checkered, but going in kind of looked like it was like straight lines that led into what looked like a sunlight in the middle where this chair was sitting.
What would people be wearing?
They were wearing like these white, like kind of like a white gowns, and they have this drape going across them that was like a black with like a little bit of red in it, and there was gold writing into it.
Was it robe-like drape? Did it go over one shoulder or both shoulders?
Just kind of the one shoulder, and kind of went down to like, so if it was up on your right shoulder, it would go down to your left side and then go down into more of a like an apron kind of look in a way.
And you've never seen the LDS Temple Endowment, have you?
No, I've never been to one. The only thing I've ever done at LDS Temple was a baptism
Did,
for
did it,
five or
did it
six of my
seem,
family members.
what was worn in the Luciferian Temple? Did it seem like yeah, it kind of, I don't know, a little bit how you might picture somewhat of a Greek robe, to where it goes over the one shoulder, starts to come over the torso, and then continues to go down knees or below after that?
Yeah, yeah.
Did you witness any wearing of aprons or anything else that was meant to distinguish them?
Yes, there was kind of like this little necklace looking thing that kind of came down into this plate. Um, and it had some type of engraving on it, which I never got to actually see what it was, but I know there was an engraving on it. And then there was more of a hat style thing they wore that wasn't like a hat like mine, um, or what you would be wearing. It's more of like a look like maybe like a top hat without the brim going around it.
Okay. What was the top of it like? Was it rounded? Was it flat?
Kind of flat at the top. Probably would stick maybe 6 or 7 inches off the top of your head, and then it was just flat. But it was like nice and crisp looking too. So it was
Okay. They'd wear that. And it sounds like they'd be performing ordinances surrounded by somebody, and hand would be on an individual and they'd raise the other hand. Is that what I remember from you?
yeah, yeah. Your left hand would have to be on the person, right hand to the sky.
Okay. Right hand to the sky. You mentioned the techniques that those participating in these ordinances would be considered high priests in that order, correct?
Yes.
And all of them possess the ability to command the intention when they enter a room, handshakes, looking in the eyes, embraces, and jolt people back into the Luciferian reality.
Yeah.
Did you ever witness how they would practice that? How anything else that you would witness? Well, while you were there, that indicates how they get their training, so to speak.
Nothing outside of that. I know there were other methods, but again, that's a lot of things that I learned, a lot of things I didn't get to learn. Because I left quick, fast, and in a hurry when I was called to that point. But
Good.
yeah, there was just things at that point. I was like, okay, I guess I'll never understand some things because I'm out of here. But there's a whole lot more things you hear about, stories you hear about. You don't. I mean, I don't know if some of the stories were true, but I know that like a couple of guys told me it's like, because I always asked them, I was like, so how do these pastors like? How do you? I know that they're teaching these things, but is there any like uh, when a Luciferian becomes a Christian pastor and he's teaching these certain things to try to indoctrinate the people, which at that time we would say, try to indoctrinate the truth in the people. They always told me there's a reason. Everybody's placed everywhere for a reason. Some people are really soft spoken, and some people have a really strong, stern voice, which is why you would walk into some churches and some pastors just yelling and shaking his fist. They all, and I can't say all pastors do that. Not every pastor is Luciferian, and some are very high energetic people, I'm sure. But Luciferian people that become Christian pastors, usually there's certain things that they would do, is what I've heard. Certain things they do that could shock an entire audience, like hypnosis. So I'd always heard that type of stuff, but I tried to understand it years later. After I was already out of it, I went to this thing in Nashville and got hypnotized. I just wanted to see if I could truly be hypnotized. And I think I was.
Was it a hypnosis event or a religious event?
It was actually a hypnosis event, like a hypnosis comedy show.
Yeah.
I wanted to go see. As like, if a comedian guy can really do this, if he can really do this, somebody who's
Give
devoted their,
suggestions to the point that somebody
yeah,
is now involved in the instructions.
yeah. And I just kind of wanted to understand it, because I'm like, if a comedian guy can do this, then surely a Luciferian man who's given his life to the cause can do a whole entire audience.
Well,
And so
'cause
I get to this comedy show, and sure enough, like, he's like, "You need volunteers?" I raised my hand. I was front and center, and I was like the seventh person chosen. And we went up there, and it was just a fun night. Everybody doing, he making all of us do funny stuff. But yeah, it's like I don't remember any of that. I remember doing it because we ended up with a DVD afterwards. But it's like I don't remember doing that. So this comedian guy was able to just snap his fingers, and I was kind of watching some of the things he was doing to us on stage. And so I started thinking of things from years earlier, where how what are some of these things that they were talking about pastors doing, these Luciferian people that become Christian pastors. And that was some of the things there. It was like, this relates so much.
Yeah. It seems like they really understand how the human body and how the human mind respond, and they become experts at it.
Yeah. They really do. And there's just so many different Christian leaders, and that have their own way of doing things. It kind of blew my mind. But I was like,
Now, think about when you escaped. Did somebody ever come knocking or calling saying, "Hey, you owe us"? They want to get the money back.
no, but the money did go away.
Okay.
It's like
How did it go away?
it just was all of a sudden. I went to make a purchase one day, and it was just gone.
Okay.
So
They came collecting.
yeah. So I was like, well,
Was that a relief? Was that a relief to you? Was that a shock to you?
it was a shock, but it was kind of a relief. Like, I don't know,
Because it would feel like, it naturally would feel like, oh crap, okay, I escaped, I got baptized, I've given myself to the Lord, I believe in Jesus Christ, but I still got these digital funds available to me at any time.
yeah. It's like I lost $100 bill one time, and it made me more sick to my stomach to lose a hard-earned $100 bill than it did all that money.
Okay.
Um,
That's it. That's actually a good feeling. What you,
yeah,
like, hey, I know the source of this. I'm glad it's gone.
yeah. It's almost like, if you still have it, and until you're in that situation, it's hard to know the feeling, but it's kind of like you're still tied to them. Like, if I spend this money, it's theirs. Like,
Yeah. 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 I think that's very much a blessing.
yeah.
So if there are, I'm going to give a prompt for any of those who are listening to this interview. If there are more questions, continue to put it inside of the comment section. We'll do more of that. But these are kind of interesting interviews because they end up getting filled with light. And we're going to go to your faith journey now. But I think there has to be an awareness of how subtly and how near invisibly Satan/Lucifer operates his kingdom that's on the earth right now, that's going to be destroyed.
Yeah. It's right in front of your face. You would be mind blown at how close you really are to it.
Yeah. I'll share with you some other time how I became aware in summer of 2020 of ritualistic abusers right where I live. Not only that, in my own ward, and I had recently been this man's elders quorum president, a man who had been a bishop twice. I shouldn't give more details than that, but others that are in church leadership and prominent community positions. It's you were about to be taken to the next level. There's other things that operate to where their children are born into it, so they get programmed from their infancy.
Yeah.
So now, as you go back to where you escape from, you escape from the church as you see your mark, Belial makes himself known. will you take us to this part? You were mentioning to where when it's time to get baptized, you could feel the forces of darkness trying to prevent you from it, skin turning gray. Will you tell me what was this spiritual slash physiological battle going on leading to you entering the waters of baptism?
You almost start to think you're crazy because you start to feel like you're hearing voices saying, "Don't do it. Don't do it. You're going to regret this. We're going to come for you. We're going to kill you." The most evil things you could think of. Even trying to like, it's almost like there's evil thoughts trying to enter your mind.
Let me just, because here's a difference that I'm recognizing. If I'm having a struggle, I'm talking to myself a whole bunch. But if I do this, it could be a sort of something, but maybe I could do this. And I'm working things out with myself. What you're describing, these are people who are presenting themselves from the outside saying, I'm talking to you. They're getting directed at you. It's not an internal, well, if I get baptized, you're not having a conversation with yourself. It's being, did it feel like it was bombarding you or invading you? What was it like?
Yeah, it was really bad. About a week, especially about the week leading up to my baptism. It was bad. Uh, there was only one real source of light in my life that kept guiding me towards those waters. Um, and at the time, I didn't understand. There were some things that made sense later I'll get into, but uh, something kept telling me to go to those waters. So out of all these evil and perverted things that were coming into my mind and coming into my life, trying to just if we can just getting thrown off course just a little bit, uh, anything to make me weaken to the point of where I would feel maybe undeserving of stepping into the waters. Um, but I mean, I got there that morning, and that's when like the final attack finally happened before entering into the.
How did this final attack manifest?
I started sweating. So my mom and dad, I remember a youth pastor, maybe two of them, both of them were there, but the pastor himself, there was quite a few people up there in this baptismal room. And I come out and I was like, man, I think I'm getting sick. And they're like, well, let's do this baptism. Let's get it. And I was like, I know I need to, but I don't know if I don't know if I should. And so I was like, yeah, I'm going to go. I kept telling myself, go, Eric, go. You've made it this far. Something keeps telling you to go. And so all of a sudden, like my body, I started sweating and they're like, you okay? And I was like, I don't know. Well, the room turned ice cold and every one of them could feel it. Every one of
Okay.
them to this day
That's
was
why
like,
that was my question. Was it just you or everybody else felt the drop in temperature?
yeah, they felt a huge drop in temperature. And I'm over here sweating and my body's heating up. And I just remember, I don't remember at the time because I wasn't looking at my skin, but I remember everybody else was like, your skin was literally like a greenish gray. And I started throwing up. And so I was coming to the floor, and at the same time, I was like, you got to pick yourself up. And while I'm telling myself, you got to pick yourself up, I'm telling myself that, but the voice didn't sound like my own that I could hear. But it's like, you got to pick yourself up. And I remember picking myself up and limping my way into the water. I felt super, super weak after that. And I don't remember much of what the pastor said while I'm standing there waiting to be baptized. I was like, I'm ready to be put under this water. I'm ready to be buried. And so that's what we did.
Wait, when you came out of the water, you're still feeling weak.
Yeah, I felt weak, but I felt a sense of power. Uh, that was the first time that I ever remember uh, in my life, from as a teenager, as an adult, to where your body feels so cleansed and you feel like this light is shining down on you in this moment, not for the world to see, but for God to see. It's that this light is shining down on you. And that's I don't know. I just remember smiling and laughing and crying right there in the water as I come back out. And I just wanted to run and I wanted to scream real loud and for joy and uh, absolute greatest life turning moments in my life. The first time I remember anything like that, like I don't know, words can't describe how I felt that day versus 13-year-old asking questions and to this 15-year-old who was just lost and confused and who was truly concerned about his salvation. And people are trying to tell you the truth, but they're only telling you their truth and the truth that they believe that they were told, instead of just like, hey, I want to know the truth, not your truth, not the truth of somebody else that told you, quote unquote, the truth. Like that's the first time I ever felt the truth was coming out of the water. And that truth was feeling like you hear the voice of God saying, well done. I told you. I told you. I got you. I'm here to protect you. I got you. And that's why I'm not dead. That goes back to, that's why I'm not dead. That's the first time I ever did anything that he instructed me to do. Because he had told me, just like I told you in part 2, that go get baptized. Where? I don't, just go get baptized. So
that's one of the best, like, just do it.
yeah.
It's like, should I wear the blue suit or the black suit? It's like, just get there.
Yeah.
Hey.
So that's what it felt like. So at that moment there, that was the greatest feeling of being like, I accomplished something for you. So it's been about, ever since that moment in my life, only things I've ever cared about was just making him proud.
Yeah.
And that feeling of, well done, son.
There is something special. That's one of the things I get to learn so much about the relationship between myself and my Heavenly Father as I get the experiences of fatherhood.
Yeah.
There's so much that happens because of that, to where as soon as I recognize my kid asking me questions that I realize doesn't have enough foundation for me to start giving the full answers.
Yeah.
I got to just give him, and I realize, okay, that's where we're at. That's where we're at. I realize his ways are higher than my ways. My thoughts are not his thoughts. I'm going to be asking questions like my little 4-year-old, to where it's like, I know you want to know, but you wouldn't get it if I tried. So let me just keep helping you develop.
Yeah. I mean, I even had that moment last night with my son. You know, it's even the little things he does that makes me smile. It's like, he just got out of his bath and he was brushing his hair. He looked in the mirror and he was like, Dad, my hair looks like Joseph Smith. What? How did you know that? He says, in my book.
In my book. Yeah.
So I was like, oh, okay. And so it's just like last night, it's like, I'm just proud that you recognize Joseph Smith. I'm proud that even though you're 4 and you don't know much of what he taught at all, other than, he taught of Christ, but it's like his hair.
Yeah.
That's cool.
So now, after baptism, you did become aware that the spiritual battle was not over. And the little bit that I understand, Belial was not done trying to keep his grip on you.
No.
What happened after that?
Well, for me, I kind of moved on with things. And just, I didn't stop thinking about it, but I quit thinking about it as much. Up until things started happening in my mom and dad's home, that they would randomly call me about, like, that my mom would talk about how she saw someone in the house. They kept sensing this evil going on, and this went on for years, just, same stuff over and over.
And the uptick, it was an uptick after your baptism?
Yeah. But not for me, just kind of at my parents' house. I don't know. It's like, just like this door had opened there and everything was still there.
And this is, you mentioned in the first one, to where you were instructed regarding the different color candles and how to do this first sacrifice.
Yeah, it's the first blood sacrifice that you make to Lucifer, which is a very, very simple one. It's the prick of a finger, signing your name in blood, and making sure you go through this proper sacrifice. And this I don't want to call it an ordinance, but it's very similar to an ordinance during the first blood sacrifice that you do. So it's supposed to be like a cleansing more than anything. But that was done at my parents' house, and then years and years and years later, it's like my mom and my sister and my brother-in-law, they'd actually lived in Florida for a few years. They moved back home up here and actually moved in with them for a little bit. And so they were vouching for it. And so at the time, I had a 4-year-old nephew who kept saying, I came by one day and my nephew told me he saw this guy in black. And I was like, guy in black. I said, where is he? Where'd you see him at? Did you see him at church, or, thinking, you saw him somewhere? He says, no, he's at night. He's at the foot of my bed.
Oh my.
I'm like, wait a minute. And so my nephew was scared. Like he was scared to death. He didn't want to be alone. Um, well, my dad, he was never a big believer. Like, cause my mom thought, well, our house is haunted. This must be a ghost. This must be something. So they all was like convincing my dad. My dad's like, no, that stuff's not real. Stop worrying about it. Well, one morning, my mom, she was up at 4 a.m. getting ready. My dad was still asleep. But she always got about an hour and a half earlier to get ready, make coffee, things like that. And was in the kitchen doing something with some coffee. She had went to walk by to go in the living room. She said she looked down a hallway and saw this figure walk from one room into her room where my dad was. So she took off running in there and like was screaming. And my dad woke up, was like, what's going on? She goes, somebody just walked.
What time of day or night is this?
About 4 or something in the morning.
Okay.
And so my dad was like, no, there's nothing here. There's like nothing. And the next thing you know, my dad's sitting there in the bed. Something grabs my mom and drug her.
How far?
Pulled her down to the floor and tried to move her up under the bed.
Okay. In other words, she feels a physical force. How did she describe it later? Arms, hands that were grappling with her?
Yeah, kind of like hands that had grabbed maybe her leg somewhere around like right below the calf or something like that.
And it didn't turn into a visual apparition for her. It was just the physical, the physical contact.
Yeah, yeah. That's the moment my dad got scared. And for years, like I was there one time just messing around, thinking, he's messing with these little ghost apps. Me and a buddy of mine, and
ghost apps.
Yeah, the little ones you get on your phone.
Is it listening for noise? What's it doing?
It's like a little radar, tells you where the ghost is in the radar. I don't even think they're legit at all.
Yeah.
But more or less fun trying to mess with my mom. Because I'd kind of stopped thinking about the whole thing. Because when I thought of like my mom's talking about the house is haunted with ghosts, I'm not thinking ghost and Luciferian things go together. So, but we ended up catching this picture of something around my mom's garage, and only later to realize this is where I actually buried the ashes to my
from your 15-year-old sacrifice.
Yeah. So I was like, okay, this is weird. And but yeah, so that moment there with my mom, that's when the reality hit my dad. Like, yeah, something is going on here. I want to know what it is. So she had called a couple of these ghost hunter people, and I don't know, they just didn't feel good about it. Well, they ended up contacting this
when they didn't feel good. In other words, they weren't showing skepticism per se. They were just feeling like this is something that's different what we deal with. What was their explanation?
Yeah, I guess some of the people that had talked to him was like, yeah, we'll do a seance, get the Ouija board out, things like that. And so eventually they ran across this guy. He was actually, he wasn't really a ghost hunter, but he was a pastor. He was a preacher. And he was not from my hometown. He had to travel from Indiana to get here. But he ended up calling my mom, who's like, well, all these things here. Well, he ended up calling me like, hey, I'm just calling you because I talked to your family so far. I'm just trying to get everybody's input of anything you've ever experienced. I was like, well, the only thing I've ever experienced is stuff from my Luciferian days. And he's like, whoa, wait, what? I was like, yeah,
Did I hear that right?
yeah. I was like, well, I could say this all nonchalant right now because I said that was years ago. And at this point, oh man, it'd already been like 6 or 7 years since my baptism. Um, so he's like, okay. Uh, so the weirdest part happened when he asked me, he said, you said you were Luciferian, right? And I said, yeah. He said, do you, and most people don't know this when you're talking to them about a blood contract. But he asked me, when did you make the blood contract? And I said, how do you know about a blood contract? I said, most people who are not Luciferian have never heard of a blood contract or the first blood sacrifice. He's like, well, because I've dealt with people who have been in this before or who were already a part of it. And I've seen some very bad things happen. And he says, I need to know when you did this. So I started telling him, I was like, it was back when I was just a teenager. He's like, okay. He says, well, I need to come. I need to come see you in person. I'm going to bring some people with me. And he said, because I'm coming to your mom's house anyway. I'd like for you to be there. So he gave me the date, and it was on a Saturday. No, it was on a Friday, and he wanted to be there at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So I was like, okay. So that Friday came. I went to the house. I started noticing, I was like, man, there's so many cars in this driveway. So I walk in, and my dad, my mom, both sisters, both of their husbands, this pastor, and like 6 or 7, 8 other people, 9 other people are there. And they have all this equipment. And I was like, oh my gosh, they're actually going to ghost hunt. So I started asking him, I was like, so what, are you ghost hunting, or he says, well, no, we're not here to ghost hunt, but we're here to see what's here. He said, because there's something in this house that's evil.
How would you describe this equipment they've got?
Um, they've got like these cameras, these different monitors, and these different devices that I guess to me,
Are they looking for temperature differences? What are they looking for?
yeah, it's kind of like it's not like the little lights that go off like the what do they call them, EMFs readers or whatever the ghost hunters use, but things, they have cameras, they're taking pictures. They've got these crosses, and this water, these holy water, and all this stuff, and kind of going around and just searching and trying to provoke anything that was there.
It's like the religious Ghostbusters.
Yeah, that's really what it felt like. But they were a great team, and so he started asking me questions about being Luciferian, and he's like, which demon did you call out? I was like, well, I really don't want to talk about that. And I started getting mad. I started feeling like this rage started when he was asking me questions about being Luciferian. I started feeling a rage. And
Did you recognize that it was unnatural?
Yeah. I was like, wait a minute. Like I was like, I hadn't felt this in years. And it's like this power started coming into you, like this physical power, like you are strong. And he looked at me, and he said, you want to kill me, don't you? And I was like, oh yeah. I was like, more than anything else right now, I want to snap your neck. I want to kill you. And I was like, wait, why did I say that?
You're physically bigger than him right now, aren't you?
Yeah.
Like you're 6'4" and you're bigger.
Yeah.
So in other words, he's giving indications that he knows what's going on with you.
Yeah. And I don't know. It's like something started taking over. And so I remember I got up and I walked away. I walked outside. He says, you okay? And I was like, I just want to be alone for a minute. And I walked outside, and I kind of just went to the side of the house and knelt down on my knees to started offering up my heart to God. And it was just like, boom, gone. Just that quick. I was like, okay. I was like, that was weird. What was that?
An attack, and you overcame it with prayer right there.
Yeah. So I went back in the house, and he says, you good? And I was like, I'm okay. He says, okay. We said, well, we're going to spend the night here. Kind of just going through the house. He says, I want to know what's here because there is something here. So I was like, okay. He says, if you don't mind sticking around. So my sisters, both my sisters, their children, they had them leave. Somebody came and got them. So as night started coming, this was like 8 o'clock at night. It was just all that was left at that point was, again, my mom, dad, both sisters, both my brother-in-laws, myself, this preacher, and a bunch of his people. And they were going through taking pictures and caught some pretty wild stuff. but they're like, Eric, would you care to call out to whatever this is? And I was like, I really don't want to. I was like, I know what we're fixing to deal with, and I don't want to be a part of it.
You were just feeling apprehension. You weren't feeling that rage come back.
Yeah, no, it was just like, I was like, I really don't want to mess with this thing. So my mom, she was looking at the guy. She asked the guy, she goes, so how are we going to kill this? And he says, well, ma'am, you can't kill what's been here since the beginning of God's creation. All we can do is make it go away. We're not going to kill it. So right before midnight, this was probably around 11 or so that night. This was caught on video. This was caught by all the eyewitnesses who were there, including my entire family, and these preachers people. But his daughter was there, and she was older, probably in her early 20s, 19, 20, 21 years old. She was really provoking, saying, I know you're here, demon. I want to know your name. And about that time, she was lifted about 3 feet in the air and thrown another 15 feet down the hallway.
How old is she? How big is she?
She's, I would say she was, again, between 19 and 20, 21 years old. Maybe 115 pounds, I would say, say roughly 115 pounds is what she was. She was little.
And as a direct result of her antagonizing and demanding contact, she was thrown.
Yeah. And everybody saw it. This is not just a me story. This was myself, again, parents, sisters, brother-in-laws, the people that were with this preacher, all witnessed it. So that's when it started getting real. And so the preacher, he was like, listen here, demon. He says, that was my daughter. So he started getting mad. And he says, we're going to end this right now. So he broke out this holy water. And for me, it was like, it was getting real, but it was like, man, this is only stuff you see in movies.
Yeah.
Holy water and stuff like that. But I kept hope, because I was like, it was water that blessed me. So he started going around, and he started just kind of chucking it here and there at each house. And then he's like, can you ask my parents, do you care if we kind of just make the cross on your forehead and each and every one of y'all? And we were all in agreement. And he was going down the line. Well, I was like the second to last one. Well, I remember I was standing on each side of my brother-in-law. I had one to my right, one to my left. And he was about 2 or 3 people down from me. And I remember blacking out. But what really happened is I didn't black out. Something had taken over at that point, full-fledged taken over. I thought I just was, because I was burning up, because my brother was, you okay, man? You're sweating up a storm.
And what you're about to describe, you don't have memory of it. This is what was reported to you when you thought you had blacked out.
Yeah. So he got a few people down from me, and I thought, okay, I blacked out, passed out, I'm gone. This is where it starts to turn. My brother-in-law said, I looked at him, and my other brother-in-law heard it himself. He says, I asked you if you were okay, because you were sweating up a storm. And he says, you kind of turned to me. He says, your eyes were like evil. He says, man, there was so much evil coming out of you. He says, it scared me. And I was like, Eric, are you okay? He says, you looked at me and smirked and says, I'm going to kill him. And so my brother-in-law was like, man, we need to get you outside and cool off.
So I'm going to kill him. Did your brother understand it that whoever was doing the driving of your body intended to kill you?
No, not at the time.
Was that, in other words, was this a threat to your brother, or was this just a threat regarding you?
This was a threat regarding the preacher who was coming down the line.
The preacher, okay.
Yeah. So my brother-in-law, it's the first time he'd ever dealt with anything like that. It was like, this is November 12, 2012 is when all this took place. So in November in Kentucky, it's really cool outside. We're a little bit past the fall, working our way towards winter. So it's like, 40 something degrees out. He says, man, you need to go outside and cool off a little bit, because you're sweating up a storm. Your body is hot. And so they took me outside, and my brother-in-law's like, man, just calm down. Well, the next thing you know, my mom, my dad come out there. A few people start coming outside like, is he okay? And about that time, they said I grabbed him by his throat and lifted him to where his feet were off the ground. And they said, you threw him another 6 or 7 feet with that one hand into the trunk of his own car.
Oh my.
And then you charged at the preacher. And that's when every man who was there, my brother-in-laws, my dad, and I think 4 or 5 of the guys who were with the preacher. And my dad's bigger than I am. So, and I got a brother-in-law, one of my brother-in-laws, who he's actually is about my size and height. But all of these men, my dad would be the first one to tell you, he says, I knew he was strong, but he says, that's a strength I've never seen come out of a human man. They said you manhandled us like rag dolls, just slinging us one by one hand grabbing us, slinging us, throwing us like it was nothing. So for me, it's like, I would love to think I'm that stout. I would love to think I'm some kind of a Samson guy, but this just wasn't the case. And so my mom said she had looked up and was like, Eric. And so apparently I looked at her and my whole eyes were blackened. And she's like, that's not my son. That's not my son. And I charged the preacher trying to get him. And as I was charging him, he just threw the bottle of holy water at me. It was like, no, I'm not going to chuck him with a little sprinkle. They just threw the whole thing at me. And he says, you fell backwards like a board. Like it wasn't like a collapse. It was just like a board. And so the preacher had told my family, we have a little bit of time, but he's coming back. So they drugged me in the house. The preacher, even to this day, this actually ended up on a Paranormal Witness show on the Sci-Fi Channel. So this is on national television, actually, this whole thing. And even the preacher who was on there who did it. But even him to this day, he'll tell you, it's like, I think we're going to lose him. Because he had somebody there who was, I guess, a medic in his family. He always keeps with him in these situations. Yeah, they're like, man, his heartbeat's really, really slowing. And it was slowing drastically. It's like, he's probably going to die here. They bring me inside and they put me on this love seat. And they kind of got me where my arms are out wide and trying to get my hands up behind my head. To kind of like, I guess, stretch me out, maybe help me breathe some. I don't know. But all of a sudden they said, I came back to, and they said, you were saying, oh, I'm fine. It's me, Eric. I'm fine. But the preacher's like, why would he say it's me, Eric, if he doesn't know? So they're like, no, you just wait right there. And he says, they kept being like, oh, please let me go. And all of a sudden it's like, just boom, it came right back.
The rage, the violence.
Yeah. I guess once whatever was in me realized, okay, they're not giving it up. So this is at the point where he's got these men sitting here holding my wrist down, holding my legs down. My brother-in-law said, both my brother-in-laws, but one of them said specifically, as the other one a witness, he says, I had my knees and my hands holding your hands and wrist down. He said, you lifted me up. I was like, in the air? And he says, in the air off this love seat. He said, you lifted me like a foot up. My whole entire body weight was in the palm of your hand, a foot off the ground. He says, man, I weigh 210 pounds. He's like, that I've never seen strength like that. But the pastor, he kept going. He says, okay. He says, demon, I want you to tell me your name. I know you're a demon. I know you're a demon. And that's when it made its name known to everyone, that it was a demon named Belial.
Is that name one you had shared with your parents before?
No, that's something you don't share with anybody. And you don't even share that with people in the temple. It's sacred to you.
Okay.
Yeah. And after I was baptized, I was like, I'll never mention that name again. I have no reason to mention this name. I'm never going to worry about this. Once I'm out of here, I'm out. So I never really even talked a lot about it, being Luciferian, with everybody once I left. Like, people knew I was, but
it's not like people are curious about it because they don't even understand that concept.
Yeah. A lot of them didn't understand it. Some people is like, I've always wanted to ask you certain things, but I don't want to understand it. And I was like, it's probably good, because especially that time being so fresh, I'm like, I don't even want to talk about it. I was like, so it's probably good you don't ask me, because I'm not going to talk about it. I was like, I'm ready to put that behind me. I'm not giving Lucifer any more light. I'm not doing it. So For the longest time, I even had people contact me about it, and I was like, no, I don't want to talk about it. It wasn't until years and years and years later that I realized, wait, this stuff is real. This is a threat. It's affecting my 4-year-old nephew because it's making itself known to him. Um, that I realized I need to talk about this. And that's actually how it ended up on national television. Was this company called Raw Television from England? It contacted me and for 3 years interrogated me over the thing, over this whole story, um, which I think was just a tactic to find out, is the story the same? Is the story ever going to change?
Yeah.
Um, but after 3 years, they were like, yeah, we're too convinced. But after talking to the pastor who did it, uh, they said, we realized quick that this is not a story, that he actually has video footage because the whole thing was video recorded.
Will you take us back to the point to where the pastor is demanding a name and Belial reveals himself?
Yes. It's at that point there where they started the battle. So he started confronting it, calling it by name. He says, I command you in the name of Jesus Christ to leave this man's body. And they said every time that they used the word Jesus Christ, it was like a ringing to maybe its ears or something like that. They said, because your face looked like you heard this loud noise. Which it's like, obviously I don't remember that, but so they're like, yeah, we battled on, and they actually battled for 3.5 hours with this thing, because it was shortly before midnight when all this started, when I thought I blacked out, and it was 4:30 in the morning when I woke up. So for 3.5 hours they battled back and forth with it, and they's like, it was not. And he told me, he says this is the most interesting case I've ever done, because out of different exorcisms I've seen and things like this, he said, I've never seen a demon so attached to a person as I've seen it with you. He said, this is really blowing my mind. He said, a lot of them, it's like they're ready to, they'll leave, they'll go to somebody else. He said, so he says, as I knew it was drawing to an end, he said, I told your parents to open the door. So my mom and dad was like, told me, yeah, we opened the door, the front door. And I was like, okay, for what reason? They're like, we got to give this demon a chance to escape, because we can't kill it. We got to let it go. And on this final, just gavel of a fist pound to the couch, he commanded in the name of Jesus Christ. He said, by the power of God, the Father of heaven, the power of all creation, the power of all sources that live within it, and his son, Jesus the Christ, I command you. And he says, next thing you know, it was like, boom. He says, your body, like your chest lifted over the rest of your body. He says, your body was like all contorted. And apparently they felt this breeze rush past them. And then like all these animals throughout this whole neighborhood, like for miles, it felt like they was going crazy. They said you could hear every animal under the moon that night going off as soon as that happened. Like something had just passed. And for me, I was down for about, I remember coming to and was like, why are you guys on top of me? Like all waking up and seeing all these men like holding me down, and curious as to why, but because I didn't know what happened. I was like, I passed out. Like, are we going to start this thing or not? And they're like, it's over. I was like, what is over? Like, man, you were just possessed by a demon. I was like, I just passed out in the kitchen like 2 seconds ago. Y'all didn't just carry me in here and put me on the couch? And they're like, no. And so for a minute,
were you noticing whether your physical body was exhausted yet or not?
Yeah, I was down for 3 weeks. Couldn't move.
Go back to that moment. Why are you guys holding me down? It was just a couple of seconds ago, and they're explaining to you. At what point did you realize I'm wiped out?
It's when I tried to get up, because I was like, as I'm talking, I'm trying to get up, but my arms, I remember going up on one of my elbows and I just collapsed. And I was like, man, they're like, you okay? And I was like, I feel like I've been run over by a tractor trailer. Like, I feel like I've just been run over like 50 times by one. And he says, you're going to feel that way. You're probably going to feel that way for a couple of weeks. I was like, what happened? And he's like, well, this demon named Belial had you under wraps for about 4.5 hours in total.
What did you
I was
think
like,
when you heard that name said to you?
oh man, like I went straight to tears. I was like, Belial. I was like, so what happened? They're like, he's gone. He's gone for now. And at the time, you feel this relief because you're thinking, oh, he'll leave me alone. Um, Today, it's like I still feel like you're out there. You're there somewhere. Um, and you know me. You know who I am now.
Did it
Uh,
think
but
about what were you feeling different in your body, your mind, your spirit? Did you notice that he still did have an attachment on you, or was it more like he was hanging around you?
kind of just around, like he was there all those years, just waiting for a moment, waiting to get recognized. And I almost feel like that's why things started happening at my mom's house. Made me wonder if like maybe they know. It's like, well, maybe we can get his attention this way and draw him back here, because in that night, that preacher, he'd actually come inside and he says, well, I think I know where you did the where you buried your ashes to your blood sacrifice. And I was like, where at? And he says, right behind the garage next to that window, down to the right a little bit. And I was like, that's it. I was like, that is it. And so you actually nailed that. And I was like, I'm impressed because uh, so that's how I knew it was real. That's how I knew he knew what he was talking about. So I was trying to, throughout the night, give hope up until, and I think everything was kind of calm. It felt like up until that moment that I realized, I'll give this pastor some hope. And I think that's when this demon was like, yeah, no, he has hope. We can't let him have hope. Because after that's when everything started to happen. But I do remember laying there that morning after coming to, and they had all packed up and left. I just wanted to sleep. But I remember going in to the bedroom there because I didn't leave the house that night. I stayed there at my parents' house that night. And I was laying there by myself and thinking, Father, you truly have preserved me. You took me from this Luciferian group that I devoted my entire life to, denouncing you the whole time. You still saved me through water. I spent my whole life at that point, up until now, doing anything you directed me to do. This demon takes over my body. Apparently, I almost died because of it. And still, you brought me through. It's like, so I remember laying there at night and I was like, here's my question to you now, God. One question. What can you not do? What can you not do? Like, you have proven to me. Nobody else in the world would believe it. Probably many would. But I know the truth. I know the source of your power and what you're capable of doing for a human person who only years earlier denounced you, fought against you, taught against you. Um, you've brought me from this. So what can you not do? What can you not do for somebody else? Um, I know, Father, if this experience has truly happened to me and you've truly been communicating with me, then everybody else can. All those other people who've communicated with you who've like, I think I talked to him. I think I know him. No, you definitely know him. You may not recognize it, but you definitely know him because I'm recognizing it at that point in my life. And so I remember laying there. I'm like, I'm beat. I'm weak. I feel like death, but my heart is full of great joy. And right now in this moment, if my heart and spirit are full of joy, you can have the body because this is all I need because I'm feeling good inside. Um, so yeah, I'd spent 2-3 weeks trying to recover from that, and the rest was kind of history from there. That's when the journey was just still continuing on from 2012 up until 15, 16 when I met my wife and started talking to her.
Mhm. And she was a Latter-day Saint. You
She was
tried
the
to save her
Latter-day
from
Saint
that.
girl.
You're gonna prove the Book of Mormon wrong only to gain a testimony of it.
Oh yeah, gained a huge testimony of the Book of Mormon. There's no way the book is not true.
And
Joseph Smith,
let
like,
me ask a little bit about that, y because it's these kind of interviews are are different,
yeah,
because I know other faith journeys that I've recorded, there's always a struggle, and I think that's something we as humans on this earthly journey recognize. but yours is the one that's been most steeped in the darkness,
Yeah.
and needed to be rescued. And it's great. I'm grateful how the light immediately shows up as you get taken out of this. Will you share with me, what was it about the Book of Mormon to where it's like, I recognize truth in this? You had read the Bible cover to cover, 14 years old or so.
Yeah. Reading the Bible, I knew that, okay, this is true. And even before the Book of Mormon, I knew it was true, because I was like, God, I was literally possessed and you saved me. I was like, so even if I've never seen God's face, I do recognize evil. I do recognize Lucifer. And if Lucifer's real, then God must be real. So all those things, I was like, okay, I know the Bible to be true. Reading the Book of Mormon, I don't know. It's like that sense of, Father, I'm reading this book. And the first time it hit me that it was true was through prayer. Because after I read it, I started recognizing, like, wait, this would make sense. God, you have always communicated with us. Why would you stop communicating with us? This book only makes sense because you communicate with people all throughout history. So why stop? But what really got me was offering up the desire of my heart to understand and to know if this book is true, because I'm thinking, Father, you took me from Luciferian and had me follow you. And I did so. I went from exorcism and almost dying to you saving me again. Please don't let some 500-page book be the reason of my downfall. Like, I was like, and that's literally what I said. I was like, please don't let some 500-page book be my reason of deception.
Mhm.
Please don't. I was like, save me from if this book is of evil, or if it's just of a man, like, please tell me. And that's when I had the encounter with the guy at the gas station. I think I talked about it in part one.
That book is true.
Yeah,
You know it's true, don't you? What is that? The book you've been reading.
that book you've been reading. I'm like, which book are you talking about?
And he had the power of beard, didn't he?
Yeah. So that's when it started dawning on me. I was like, okay, so through that journey of about a year afterwards, I read the Book of Mormon. I kept reading it. I was studying church history, and the more I come to understand the Book of Mormon, the more I come to understand Joseph Smith and who he really was, not who the church told me he is or who he was, but who Joseph really, really was. I got to thinking, I started praying. I was like, okay, I don't want to know if the church is true. I don't care. I want to know if Joseph Smith is a prophet. That'll tell me if that church is true. And through finding out that Joseph Smith was a prophet, I left the church.
So learning that Joseph Smith was a prophet, it is a technique that's used by the church inside of the introduction of every copy of the Book of Mormon, to where if you know this truth, it's automatically attached to this. Right now I'm going over to just the introduction of the Book of Mormon inside of every one of these paper copies, where it talks about the two nations, the Nephites and the Jaredites. But the end of the introduction ends like this: those who gain this divine witness from the Holy Spirit. Well, you know what? Let me go back. We invite all men everywhere to read the Book of Mormon, to ponder in their hearts the message it contains, and then ask God, the eternal Father, in the name of Christ, if the book is true. Those who pursue this course and ask in faith will gain a testimony of its truth and divinity by the power of the Holy Ghost. Boom. Imagine if it ended there, but then it attaches this to it. Those who gain this divine witness of the Book of Mormon from the Holy Spirit will also come to know by the same power that Jesus is the Savior of the world. Boom. True. That Joseph Smith is his revelator. He is the one who produced this, and prophet in these last days, and that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is the Lord's kingdom, once again established on earth, preparatory to the second coming of the Messiah. And it's not just like we're the church is true. I love bold claims, because they're some of the easiest to either verify or falsify. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, =, the kingdom of God.
Yeah,
Why did gaining a testimony of Joseph Smith cause you to leave the church? I mean, the introduction of the Book of Mormon is, if you know the Book of Mormon is true and that Joseph Smith truly is a prophet, then you know the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints =, the Lord's kingdom.
That's the question I asked. First question I ever asked the elders were, is it possible that the Book of Mormon is true, and that Joseph Smith is the revelator and prophet in the last days, but after him, nothing else? We're like, no, if you know those to be true, then the church has to be true. Something in my heart told me, no, that's not the case. It's not right. Because I asked the hard questions. They always told me, focus on the milk, don't try to eat the meat. Like, why do y'all tell everybody that?
I'm a
Because
steak boy.
this
Come on.
is a tactic that I used to use, is let me slowly guide you into this until
In
you
other
get
words,
to the meat, and then it's not going to
the
seem like it's
Luciferian
okay.
journey of, let me just lead you little by little.
Yeah. And so it's like, no, if this is truth, I mean, didn't Christ say that these are my sheep, and if they hear my voice, they know me? It, I mean, to me, it's like, give me the meat. If it's of God, I'll know it. I'll know this truth. And so I was like, I guess I'll do this myself. And no, at first, like I was literally alone in that journey. Um, my wife at the time, she was by the book Latter Day Saint girl who was, she believed in the Book of Mormon and Joseph Smith, but it was one of those things where she was taught growing up her whole life, and her family taught her, and they taught them. It's just stuff you hear, like a Baptist would go through, even, or a Methodist. But it's, if these two things are true, the church has to be true. But for me, it was like, you're telling me he practiced polygamy. People defending him, people getting angry.
Who made that an issue for you? Because now it's much more in the public consciousness, especially the LDS consciousness, that it is not established history that Joseph Smith is a polygamist. How did that become an issue for you? Did you hear somebody talking about it, or why even bring that up?
I was concerned about it because a question I'd ask somebody was, hey, so if we go to the celestial kingdom, so if the world ends right now, we're all going to the celestial kingdom, you're telling me that we have to be sealed, correct? They're like, yeah. I was like, okay. I was like, so how does that work? Because I am going to go into the assumption that when God comes back, there's not going to be an equal number of men there is to women. God's great, but like I just that's a little much. And I don't see that being like, oh, I need exactly this many men, this many women. Those of you who are good, but you don't have a husband or wife, better look next time. So I started thinking of questions of celestial marriage and things like that. And then that started going back to what people were telling me. Well, kind of like Joseph, when he had multiple wives, that's how we're going to be in heaven. It's like, wait, what? And they're like, we're going to have multiple wives when we get to heaven. Some of us faithful saints will have multiple wives. So I was like, oh,
the higher level. They're explaining to you that you're going to have multiple wives because of your faithfulness. Let me ask, I feel like asking a two-part question. Was there anything back in your Luciferian days about being able to have many women? Is there anything at this point? It's like, why is it multiple women to the faithful? Because this is the missionaries and church members teaching this to you?
Yeah. It was always the questions that nobody talked about unless somebody came along and actually had questions. Most people wouldn't.
I'm sick of the milk. You better get that meat taco truck out here.
They always told me, they're like, oh, well, you're not ready for the meat yet. And I was like, man, you're 18 years old. How could you tell me what I am and I'm not ready for? Like, I've been through the trenches spiritually on this journey. So,
but there's a certain technique that I recognize, because I think about the polygamy days in general. They kept it a secret until they felt like, boom, nobody can stop us now. We've kept these desires in our hearts and these teachings secret until Brigham Young moves the Latter-day Saints 1,000 miles away and gets his own army, and now says, boom, who's going to stop us now? I don't think there's evil intentions with the missionaries saying you need the milk before the meat, but I think there's a natural recognition. If we just tell it to you straight, you're not going to keep learning with us.
Yeah. And that was I guess the thing was I told them I was like, I mean, I was like, I'm telling you, I'm a little different. Uh, I have to know these things. I said, I'm not going to sit here and waste my time. I said, I wasted enough of my life dealing with unnecessary, uh, evil things, things that throw me off course. I just need to know if this is one more thing. And um, I don't know. Eventually, I went through those motions. I was like, I'll go to the church. I'll start to study and see what everybody has to say.
You already love the Book of Mormon. You got a testimony of it. And it sounds like you got a testimony of Joseph Smith.
Yeah.
It's just not translating to the things that they're adding on of you're going to have multiple wives if you're faithful enough.
Yeah.
Now, here's the first part of my question. Was there anything like that in that you witnessed in your Luciferian days? You already mentioned one guy, it weren't no thing for him to have his wife be involved in a seduction so he could get power and gain. But was there anything about having multiple wives that was part of the promises?
Oh, yes, yes, yes.
Oh.
As a kind of like Lucifer. So when he left heaven, that was his promise to us. He knew that in reality that he would save a lot of people, quote unquote, save a lot of people. So for us, it's in the same way that that Muslims have that same belief.
Yeah, you had me thinking about that as well, to where the inspiration for me to kill myself in the process of killing the infidels is the ladies waiting upstairs for me.
Yeah,
72 of them.
That's the thing. It's the one thing Lucifer's big on teaching. That's how he infiltrates religion, is through many different promises that he's making, and many women are one of those.
Yeah,
which is
because I just think about how Jacob, high priest after the holy order of God in Jacob chapter 2, he lays the smackdown when people are using David and Solomon as their excuses for once again seeking many wives and concubines.
Yeah.
Jacob points out unmistakably that was abominations. And then I'm about to turn it into Doctrine and Covenants section 100. Did you read section 132 back then?
No, I at that point I hadn't even read Doctrine and Covenants yet.
Okay, just okay. Then I won't get off on a tangent, but there is one section and one section only which claims to be Joseph Smith teaching polygamy. It is section 132, and you're gonna, you know what? You and I at some point need to do a follow-up episode. Have you read that section yet?
Not all the way through. No.
Then you and I are just gonna do. We're going to do an episode where it's just section 132, and you tell me if you recognize anything from there. That's some alarm bells.
Oh yeah, that'd be a good one.
Okay,
that was a big thing for me, because one of the first things I remember finding, and I've for some reason I ask a Latter-day Saint and they don't want to answer it, but I'm like, will you help me with this quote? And they're like, well, yeah, which one? I'd love to help you. I'm like, okay. What a thing is to be accused of having 7 wives when I can only find one. Like, who said that? I was like, Joseph Smith. You care to help me with understand that? No, I don't know where you're finding it. Is it scripture? Is it in scripture? No. Oh, well then don't worry about that. But Joseph Smith said it.
Even though Joseph Smith says it in public, make sure that it's published in the church newspaper.
Yeah. They're like, if it's not scripture, don't do anything about it. Don't worry about it. Don't pray about it. Don't focus on it.
You and I could just spend an hour straight only quoting Joseph Smith, vehemently denying and denouncing any form of more than one wife, any and all forms, and the dedication for people who consider themselves faithful to either omit or hide from Joseph Smith's teachings, and replace it with many wives and concubines.
Yeah, that was the one thing I come to understand about Joseph was he had in his heart one woman, and that was Emma Smith. Hands down, that's the wife he had. Was he sealed to other people? I think probably. Married? No. He had one wife.
Mm-hmm.
He had one wife, and that was very, very, very apparent to me. So I'm thinking to myself, how is it that we?
So in other words, they weren't convincing.
Yeah, it was not convincing to me. There was nothing even the Book of Mormon, I'm thinking to myself, why would he translate if like why would he translate this book? I feel like the Bible and the Book of Mormon condemn polygamy.
Yeah.
I feel like Joseph Smith was not just like, oh, what thing is to be accused of having seven wives and I can only find one, but trying to charge people who were practicing polygamy. Um, why did Brigham hide polygamy from Joseph? Like, there's so many things that they wasn't able to answer. It's like I know who's behind polygamy, and it wasn't Joseph Smith. Um, to me, it seemed like Brigham Young, which made sense
And
to me.
you had never been introduced to anybody inside or outside of the church who disputes Joseph Smith's polygamy, have you?
No, not at that point, especially. I find them a little bit more now, but this was back in like 2017, and I was fresh in the church, and only Latter-day Saints or people I even knew that believed in the Book of Mormon was the 30 or 40 people here in Madisonville who actually attended the ward. So this is all I had. And so for me, it was like, I'm just curious of Joseph. Like I'm curious of him. I understand what it was like to be a teenager and be concerned for your salvation. So I know what it's like for a kid, for a child to offer up the desires of his heart. So he went through all of that just to have a bunch of wives in the end of his life, only to be, hey man, your own children are dying. Do you not do you not think you're being cursed by God or something? Your children are dying, people are dying, your family's being threatened, you're being threatened with your own life. If this is a big lie, then why are you going on? If this was all for polygamy. And so yeah, like the more I studied, I was thinking, well, it wouldn't be a lie if he knew in his heart that everything he's experienced was true. Um, so that's what I wanted to study more on him. And so I was like, I have to understand the polygamy thing because I've read the Bible, and you could tell me, oh, there's guy, it's okay because there was guys in the Bible who had multiple wives. I'm like, yo, they were
Yeah.
also condemned too. So
Yeah.
these guys were.
Well, and here's something interesting. In Jacob chapter 2, that's where the actions of David and Solomon are called abominations. Joseph Smith, throughout his whole life, he would use fornication and polygamy almost like synonyms. They are one in the same in all of his teachings. But in Jacob chapter 2, when the Nephites are saying, well, David and Solomon did it, who did they not point to? They had the brass plates, which was the uncorrupted book and law. They didn't try to say, but Abraham did it. They didn't try to say Jacob did it or others. So I suspect that they had a more accurate record regarding Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That's why the Nephites didn't try to justify themselves with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They said, but David and Solomon, well, so Jacob lays the smackdown saying, those were abominations. Those were whoredoms. You will not do the abominations that they were starting to do again in Jerusalem. That's why we're here on the promised land.
Yeah. That's, I mean, that was my biggest question with Joseph. It's like, if I can get past this part, if I can just understand if he did practice polygamy, because I feel like he's openly teaching against it. I feel like he's openly condemning it. Like,
how did they share with you? I know that they're given their ideas. Well, but in the celestial kingdom, those who are more faithful. Do you remember them teaching you anything taught by Joseph Smith?
No,
never. Because
never.
I mean, literally, there's only one document in the entire world which claims to be Joseph Smith teaching polygamy. It is Doctrine and Covenants, section 132. Nothing else.
Well, they told me that. I mean, I knew that they said he had in Doctrine and Covenants they taught it, but I don't know. I always felt like it was something maybe because I'd always heard that. Well, it wasn't the whole polygamy issue wasn't brought up during Joseph's life. I read that somewhere, so I'm thinking to myself, well, then who brought it up? Oh, of course it's you. Of course it's Brigham Young.
Yeah.
Oh, he taught it to me in private or something like that. I'm like,
Yeah.
why would he teach you something in private? That's a secret combination. Pretty sure he condemned that too. So, that's when I started putting things together. Like, okay, so I started finding out, okay, Brigham and Emma are having these problems. She's staying back. Joseph's mom's staying back. Everybody else that was real close to him is dead. So it's like, is my thought was, is Joseph's dead, Hiram's dead, Samuel's dead, um, Emma, Lucy, most of their family staying back. So now Brigham's going out west to do what? Start maybe his own religion, his own Latter-day Saint religion,
Well, here's
where
what
he can
I'll share
practice
with you.
polygamy.
Brigham Young, after they showed up here in Utah, he had the entire church membership rebaptized. Something
Wow.
about their previous baptisms were not enough for Brigham. Have the entire membership rebaptized.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I'd also seen pictures of what some of the homes of the early saints look like too, compared to that of Brigham's when they actually got out west. And it was kind of sad to see this huge mansion he got to live in while these other people lived in, you know, 200 or 300 square foot little
Shanties.
cabin. Yeah. So I was like, this is.
Well, take us to where you were mentioning. Okay, so polygamy is a big issue. How is it that this testimony of Joseph Smith caused you to leave the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints?
It caused me to leave because the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints today, and probably after Joseph's death, is not the same Church of Christ that Joseph started by the power of God. Everything I felt like Joseph was teaching, everything he openly talked about, to even the word of wisdom, did not sound like Joseph Smith.
And when you say the word of wisdom, you're talking about the way that the wording that's in Doctrine and Covenants, or the way that the church teaches the word of wisdom today?
I think the way they teach it, and some of the things I didn't know, like I didn't know that on occasion Joseph would have a beer.
Yeah.
I didn't know that because all I'd heard when I talked to my wife, like, do y'all drink? No, LDS people don't drink at all.
Yeah.
We don't drink. We don't smoke. We don't, use tobacco.
See,
Brigham, none of these things.
It's interesting because Brigham was well reputed as having one of the most stocked liquor cabinets west of the Mississippi.
Yeah. So for me, it was like, okay, well then why was it so different then compared to what it is now? Well, through modern prophets and modern revelation, I'm like, so God just like changes his mind every couple of years.
Well, how is that sinking in? In other words, the idea to where Joseph Smith was a prophet, you read the Book of Mormon, you get a testimony of that. Probably the most repeated doctrine of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints today is we've got prophets just like back then. Joseph Smith was one in a line of prophets. Did you believe that the president of the church was a prophet the same way as Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Joseph Smith?
No.
Why not?
No. Where's the miracles? Where's the revelations? He's got a nice, sweet old voice, but I wasn't seeing any.
Was it President Monson at the time?
Yeah, President Monson. He actually was just a short period of time before I guess he had passed away, and then President Nelson. But I started kind of doing a little, I don't want to say an intense study on them, but just to see if any of them ever had these experiences that other prophets would have. Like Joseph spoke with God. Moses had spoke with God like one man talks to another. How did all these prophets receive all these? Just what to me, I guess a normal person would seem like just this is an insane revelation. He has shown you all these things. Now it just seems like it's just not the same. I'm not seeing this outpouring of the Spirit come from a prophet versus what I would Joseph Smith. Why were most of these prophets, Joseph Smith, look at him, he struggled most of his life. He swam through deep water. He wasn't a doctor or a heart surgeon who became a prophet and still has a lot of money in his pocket and creates malls with his church funds. No, he was. Matter of fact, I think I remember reading something on one time, but he talked about how certain people didn't even have to pay tithing.
Yeah. Like those who are in need, they won't be paying to the church; they'll be receiving.
Yeah, and to me that made sense. I'm thinking that's a prophet. That's a man who recognizes because it's a God who's given that man the ability to recognize those in need. So it's like give to the needy, and then the needy give to the needy. It's like,
Well, let me ask this. I'm going to derail you a little bit. What about the keys? Here's the other thing that's said the most. When people have questions about whether President Nelson shows the prophetic gift, the conversation from those trying to say that President Nelson is a prophet will say he holds the keys. Joseph Smith gave the keys to Brigham, and President Nelson holds those keys today. In other words, they're in charge of the church, just like a good custodian. They've got all the keys.
I don't believe that.
In
I
other
don't
words,
believe that at all.
was that explanation given to you? Would it click with you?
I mean, they told me that they had the keys. I just don't feel like I believed it because I was studying something at the time. I think, um, was it the keys that the only way the keys could be received was if Elijah came back, correct?
Yeah.
Um, and so to me, I felt like after doing so much research on Joseph and reading about him, like I feel like even up to a few weeks before his death, he was still waiting for Elijah to come.
Yeah. He always,
Um,
it wasn't until later that that the history gets changed, but Joseph Smith always referred to the return of Elijah as a future event.
yeah. And so from my understanding at that time was those keys will be restored when Elijah comes back. Well, if where did that come in? If Joseph was still waiting for Elijah, just even a few weeks after his last, what was it? As it King's, what was his name? He went to the funeral.
King Follett.
King Follett. Yes. That's one of my favorite discourses. I'm almost makes me want to listen to it again sometime, but
Yeah.
It's like he was still waiting. And
Quick anecdote. When I was a teenager using the AOL You've Got Mail chat messenger, I had that I was a Latter-day Saint in my profile. And so I'd get Christian ministers that would reach out to me with some frequency, and they wanted to prevent me from serving a full-time mission for the church. And they thought the King Follett Discourse, that is the linchpin. And I read that and I was, wow, this is amazing. This is somebody who has a command of the scriptures that only comes by communication with the Almighty.
Oh yeah.
And it was powerful. I love the King Follett Discourse.
Yeah. I get a lot of preachers tell me that too. It's like, well, have you ever read a King Follett Discourse? I'm like, yes. Have you? Like, oh, well, I mean, I have, but I didn't think you'd be as excited about it. And I was like, oh man, I love it. It's like that right there really that well, you don't understand. Won't we just read it together or something?
Okay. So there's a bunch of different things to where, okay, you got a testimony of Joseph Smith, you got a testimony of the Book of Mormon, the explanation of modern day prophets, I'm just not seeing it. The keys, I don't really think so much. It's just so different. How does that translate into you leaving the church?
That was a hard move.
How's your wife interpreting? I mean, you get baptized a member of the church. You guys go to the temple prep classes. I mean, you go through a whole bunch of changes. I think that's why the Lord can work with you, is because you're sincerely trying to find the truth the best you can.
Yeah.
How's she interpreting? Okay, well, you got baptized. We were thinking about going to the temple. We were prepping for it. Give us a little bit of insight on where things go in your family life as you're still making these changes.
Actually, it wouldn't be as bad as you would think. I spent all that time in the beginning trying to convert her and tell her the Book of Mormon wasn't true, and she was stuck with it. So I'm thinking this is going to be tough. This time, instead of getting like a Baptist preacher with her and hitting the kitchen counter, being like, "This is the Almighty Bible and nothing stands against it," and I was like, "I'm going to take a patient approach with her," and so that's what I did.
Did you feel your love growing?
Yeah. Yeah. A lot, actually. Yeah. Especially during that time, 2020 was the year all of it started happening. That whole year I spent talking to her and really just pouring out all these things like, well, here's, this is Joseph. this prophet that the church talks about, this man, this prophet of the restoration, like this is the man you all talk about, but here's who he really is. And this makes him a more beautiful human being now that he is teaching the true God. He is teaching God Almighty and his son, Jesus Christ. This is what he wanted us to know. He told me that I didn't have to follow a prophet, that I could communicate directly with God myself. This is what Joseph Smith was teaching. So why is it that church is teaching follow the prophet? She goes, well, it's just what we learned growing up. I was like, I see that because y'all have a little kid song called Follow the Prophet. So
I even made a surf rock version of that a number of years ago.
oh man. So I told her, so why that? Why not? Why we not have a song called Follow Christ? Why does it have to be Follow the Prophet? I was like, there's just this feeling I get, overwhelming feeling I get that this modern way that we're doing things is not what Joseph was trying to teach. That I don't have to. I said, what makes this church any different from me going and just becoming Catholic and confessing everything to a bishop, to the father, to even the Pope of Rome? Like, I said, this doesn't feel any different. This just feels like an organization with a lot of money who likes to buy malls or make malls. She goes, yeah, you bring up the malls a lot. And I was like, I'm just trying to make you understand that
you're not impressed by the fancy dancing buildings. If you have ever been to that mall, the City Creek Mall, it is a structure and facility to behold.
Never seen it. I've seen it.
Well, you're going to have to come out and visit, and that'll convert you back.
Oh man. But I told her, I was like, I'm just thinking to myself, like, I already know what Christ thinks. I said, I'm not even going to go that conversation with anybody. I was like, but Joseph Smith, what would he have thought of, like, look, I went through this work and this struggle because I was commanded by God to do so, and you're building a mall? Like, I thought this church was to help people. And I told her, I was like, let's just think about this rainy day fund they have. Let's think about how much money they spent on this mall. Like, why are there people starving still? I said, why are there still people hungry? I said, as long as there's going to be hungry people, that mall
seems like it's just the trappings of Babylon. And because you're mentioning the mall, the latter. It seems like the reoccurring theme is what you're getting from the scriptures and from the life of Joseph Smith is very different than the institution that you're seeing today.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, okay, Jane Manning. Forget how many hundreds of miles she walked to get to the Saints, only for Joseph to clean her feet. That just a man who was sent to earth to become a prophet cleaning some woman's feet. Apparently some woman who's because of her skin tone at the time couldn't have had the priesthood. No, I think that's wrong, because I know that there were men of color with the priesthood, and it wasn't until somebody else took over that, all of a sudden God changed his mind about that.
So over and over again, you're noticing a stark contrast between what was taught by Joseph Smith compared to what was practiced by Brigham Young.
Yeah. It's two different teachings. Like, I don't know how. And that's what I told my wife through that 2020 journey. I was like, here's this, here's that. If what I'm seeing is true, if Brigham Young and Joseph Smith are really doing these two things, one of two things: Joseph is a true prophet, and Brigham Young he's not even a fallen prophet. He just wasn't a prophet at all. Or they're all wrong, and this church as a whole is going to fall to the trenches of hell, as Baptists would say it. I was like, but here's the thing: Joseph is a prophet. The Book of Mormon is the divine word written by him through the power of God. If that's the case, Brigham Young's not a prophet. You can't convince me otherwise. They do not teach the same things. Tithing changed. Priesthood changed. So who couldn't and couldn't have it? Matter of fact, I think I remember at one point, wasn't Brigham Young like a debt collector if you didn't pay your tithings? Yeah, I'm pretty sure I read that somewhere too.
If somebody goes to some of the options of keyword searching in the Journal of Discourses, if you type in the word thumb screws, you're going to get Brigham Young teaching from the pulpit the application of thumb screws for those who are debtors in regards to their tithing to the church. That's a great one. So let me move you forward.
Right.
Did you get a resolution? Okay, so these are frustrations, and a lot of people in the church, a lot of people have left the church. A lot of people have just given up their faith in God altogether because of these frustrations and inconsistencies that you're seeing. Did you get some sort of resolution? Where are you at now as you deal with this?
Today?
Yeah.
I believe like today I'm at the point where I know the Bible to be true. At least as far as I can read. I think there's more. I think there was a lot left out.
Yeah.
I can't put my 100% trust into a council of people who used to worship the sun and decided what Bible was true. Um, I believe the Book of Mormon come to help make sense of everything for our day, and that it was truly meant for our day. I do believe Joseph Smith to be the prophet of the restoration. He was a prophet who came and served his first ministry, and I honestly feel like he has a second one. Um, and I feel weirdly that he'll come and he'll finish it up, because I don't think a lot of Latter Day Saints are like are understanding that there's still a sealed portion. So who's going to write that?
Yeah.
Um, is it going to be President Nelson who translate the sealed portion of the Book of Mormon?
Well,
Like,
it's interesting that Joseph Smith has promised in the Doctrine of Covenants that the keys will remain with him until
yeah,
the second coming.
yeah.
And I think the Lord is true to that promise.
Oh yeah, the Lord has no reason to break a promise. I don't think he's capable of breaking that promise.
So in other words, do you find yourself continuing to grow in light on your spiritual journey? Are you in a holding pattern? What's going on?
No, I'm continuing to grow. I think in the last year, during 2022, that's when I started opening up and thinking, okay, so I have no church to really join, but I know the Bible's true, the Book of Mormon's true. I know Joseph the prophet. Let's if Joseph Smith was the prophet of the modern day revelation, or of the restoration, and he taught modern revelation for our day, then what did he teach? And then maybe that'll help me go back to some of the prophets of old and understand what were they teaching. And the one trend was that we could all talk to God, because they all talk to God, and I think that's what they wanted us to do. So up through 2021, I started doing that, and he started leading me until 2022, when I met the Doctrine of Christ group, and started understanding that there was men and women among that that was in that group, who I felt were on the right track, who were on that right path, on that same path that I was on.
I remember the question that you had when you were prayerfully presented to your Heavenly Father. What are we, a church? What's going on? What's going on? Remind us of the answer that you got as you're trying to figure out, is this a community? Is this a movement? Is this a church?
Yeah, I was like, okay, is this a church? Because if it is, I want to be a part of it. And it wasn't so much that, yes, Eric, this is a church, but it was my sheep. And it was him saying, this is my sheep. They know me and they hear my voice, or they hear my voice and they know me. And I felt that, okay, so is that everybody here? Because there's some people I really need to know if you're guiding them, because some people are leaders, or what looks like a leader,
or at least they're putting themselves up that way.
Yeah. So I was like, I need to know, because I see the truth in what he's saying, but there's some red flags that I'm receiving too. So I need to know. And then, of course, his downfall was when you start telling people to seek the face of Christ and to start praying to have dreams and revelations, because that's what I did. And that's how I come to find out some things, but through my dreams. Especially in 2022, having 7 huge dreams that I'm assuming we'll eventually get into.
Yeah. Because you shared with a couple of those dreams. One of them is to where the man leading you later learned that it was the Savior. You even had a visionary experience, able to witness his face. But you were shown inside of the room where the school was meeting. You saw the separation to where those gathered to the light and those who became hardened in darkness.
Yeah.
I just have to report to you now, those that you saw gathered into the darkness, it is getting darker. Thankfully those who have who've gathered into their influence is incredibly small, gratefully, but those who are founded on Christ, it's awesome. But it continues to be the same struggle to hear the voice of the Lord and follow it. There ends up being a whole bunch of fellowship that happens, getting together, praying, reading scriptures. But I think everybody is hungering and thirsting for being able to hear the voice of the Lord for themselves and feel that closeness in whatever circumstances.
Yeah, that's where I was. Like I was like, I want to know, I want to hear. Like I was getting, it's like a desperate feeling in a way, but I was hungry and thriving. I was like, I want to know you. Like you've brought me so far. Now it's like let's take this relationship to the next level. Let's
Yeah. Well,
let's
I love how the Book of Mormon ends with Moroni, the son of Mormon. He's literally the only mortal that he knows left with a testimony. And he lives in a way to where Jesus Christ speaks to him as somebody speaks to their friend.
yeah.
And I realize that's the invitation for every one of us. No matter what circumstances, your people have either degenerated into cannibalism or else they're killed by their enemies, and still able to have Jesus speak to you with that level of closeness. That's what we need. And I'm grateful for my involvement in the Doctrine of Christ community, because people are hungry for that no matter where they're at.
Oh yeah. And that's one of them things too that I'm super grateful. Like I am people tell me all the time, it's like I hear things as far as like, well, so you know the truth now. Yeah. What about when you were Luciferian?
Yeah, what is that difference?
It's like what about when I was Luciferian? And especially here lately, I've gotten a few comments myself, I'm sure as we all have, apparently, from other people being like, well, do you feel like you were steered wrong? Well, no, because God wasn't steering me at all. You can't, like, it's okay to follow God because and be deceived by the devil, because it's going to happen. You're going to make a judgment call that's wrong. You are where you need to be at that moment. Whether you're following the right person or not, you are where you need to be at that moment. Whether you're following anybody, like I've watched Denver Snuffer stuff. I've watched Phil Davis stuff. I've watched all these people. And you could easily ask me, like, well, you were deceived. Can you admit that you were deceived? Yeah, I can. Okay, I was deceived. I was deceived for the X amount of years of my life, but I'm still saved by the grace of God. He still continues to lead and guide me. So you think because I made this one wrong decision that you've never made, like you've just obviously you're so perfect, you never made a wrong decision.
About in the eternal scheme of things, or just this earthly existence as we know it, is it better for us to sit on the couch to avoid making a mistake, or to get out and start wandering, trying to hear the voice of the Lord? I think of the wilderness imagery that is throughout the scriptures, to where there's either going to be a very small group or else a specific individual. They're called out into the wilderness. I think we're in the wilderness stage of things, to where we have to learn to live by every word that proceeds out of the mouth of God.
Yeah. And I think we're all on that path. I think, like, it's Christians hated me and ridiculed me when I became a Latter-day Saint. And then I joined this group, and the Latter-day Saints were like, oh, hey, we want to join in with you guys, and we'll bash him too. And it's like, they always like, you follow this movement, and these movements only last for so long. And I'm thinking, well, your church has only been around for 200 years. So you're telling me that my movement's small, but you're in a 200-year-old church. So in the eternal grand scheme of things, over the course of humanity, your church is an infant baby who can't even open its eyes yet, and you're telling me about my movement. Okay, so that works too. But
Eric, I would talk to you for another couple of hours right now. I feel like there's a lot of stuff for people to digest.
Oh yeah, there's still so much more.
I'm grateful how everything is filled with faith. Will you remind us again how your walk with God is as you continue to move forward?
my walk with God is there. He has me where I need to be. Um, because why save me from all these things? If you didn't have a plan for me, as you do for us all, why bring us to this point? You could easily say, well, he's got me where I am. I'm in the church I'm in. This is where he meant for me to be. Maybe, maybe not. Maybe that church is just a stepping stone because he used churches for me throughout my life as a stepping stone to get to this point to where it's like, look, now do you see? Now do you see that you can drop to your knees and cry out to me and that I will speak with you? Yes, Father, I see that now. I'm glad that there's these communities. I'm glad that there's these groups. I'm glad that there's these churches, but um, I'm at the point now where we have a relationship and not a religion with each other. You're my father and I'm your son, and that I can talk to you anytime I want. You will judge me on the bad decisions I make. You would be like, no, Eric, you're not supposed to do that. You're not supposed to listen to that guy. You're being deceived. But I'm your father. I'm going to love you. I'm going to have my arms open to you, and that's my relationship today. Is can I be deceitful? Oh, absolutely. Can I listen to the wrong person for a little bit? Absolutely. But he's still there with his arms open, being like, come on back. Come on, man. You're getting too close to the road. You're going to get hit by a car. So that's the relationship I have with my father, and I feel like he tells me the things I need to know, that the Bible is true, the Book of Mormon's true. Joseph Smith is his prophet of the restoration, and that he had done a mighty work during his life, and he's still got more work to go, and that there's people that are going to be there with him.
Eric,
and then in the meantime, let's just talk to God.
Eric Samuels, I'm grateful again for you being on the Disciple of Christ podcast.
I appreciate you.